Improvement in chess is all about starting to think about the right things and gradually developing your thoughts as you go by, whether it be with study or it be with over-the-board play. We've been talking about pawn structures in our first example. Now I want to move on to the idea of coordinating the pieces. Learning how to get all the pieces working together as a unit will represent a big step forward in your chess lives. This is not at all an easy skill to acquire. It takes years and years of dedicated study and practice, but you've got to start somewhere. And it's important to understand that in chess you're not going to get very far if you just use a few of your pieces or one or two of your pieces in isolated units. I see this particularly in the games of young players. They get carried away with the power of the queen and the rooks, and they almost use these pieces exclusively to try and destroy the enemy. Well, that's not going to work, and getting the pieces working together is a really important skill, or at least starting to think about it. We're going to look at a really masterly game now between Mikhail Gurevich, a modern day grandmaster, one of the best players in the world about 10 years ago. Nowadays he focuses more on coaching. I think he coaches the Turkish national squad, if I'm not mistaken. And Vladimir Malakov, who is also a world-class grandmaster. And here we see black completely outplayed by white, who really displays a tremendous knowledge of how to get all his pieces working for him. This game was played in the Aosta Open back in 2002. Gurevich is white. The opening is a standard Queen's Gambit. Black plays what is known as the triangle system. It can lead to many different openings. Usually it leads to a kind of Slav defence to the Queen's Gambit setup. Even if you don't know what the Slav defence is, rest assured that Black's setup is very, very solid. Black sets up an almost impregnable pawn structure right from the word go, and will gradually try to evolve his position as the opening and the middle game develops. White, for his part, has slightly more space, slightly more freedom of movement, and he's got to try and use this advantage to build some sort of edge in the middle game. But it's not at all easy to do. Many amateur players fall foul against the Slav. They tend to feel that they're banging their head against a brick wall. And the Slav defence, this method of play for black, has become incredibly popular at all levels of chess, but particularly at grandmaster level, where technique is so rarefied the slightest mistake costs the game. Well, these guys are always looking for setups which are almost impregnable. And so this is the type of thing that black is trying to do here, to set up a really solid position and then to take it from there. Gurevich plays knight bd2. The knight on d2 is very secure. It reinforces white's position. I think it's directed against lines where black takes on c4. If black was to take on c4 in this position, white would take back with the knight. This is a refinement of an old player called Capablanca, who in fact was one of the greatest players of all time. He found that taking with the knight in this position really made it difficult for black to free his game, because black is relying on pawn breaks such as e5 or c5 to get his pieces going in the middle game. And as you can see, the knight on c4 really does clamp down on the e5 square. Now, obviously going back to knight bd7, the other move here, and this is very, very standard, is knight c3. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but Gurevich obviously feels that knight bd2 is more in keeping with his strategy in this game, which firstly and foremostly is very simple. He wants to get his pieces out, and this is what he does. So Gurevich is meeting black's solid setup with a very, very solid setup of his own. Note the pawn structure in the centre. White has slightly more space because he's got two pawns in the centre to black's one. Black jabs at the bishop. The bishop retreats, and now Malakov tries to break for freedom by playing c5. Well, at this stage, black's got to think about what he's going to do with his queenside pieces. This is often a spectre in the Queen's Gambit, which black finds coming back to haunt him at virtually every stage of the game. What is black going to do with these pieces? So c5 is an attempt to free black's game. Black's upcoming plan might involve moves such as b6, bishop b7, and certainly in this position the move rook c8. Once black gets a rook to c8, the white queen can often find herself on the wrong square. So black is looking to coordinate his pieces by these means, and white is looking to shake off that plan, if he can. So Gurevich takes on d5. Now black's plan, whilst very good, takes some time to come into focus. So white uses that time to station his pieces on excellent squares, and bishop g3 is just a very good move. Going back, a club player might thoughtlessly exchange the bishops in this position. But you see, after b6, black has a very comfortable game. Black is getting ready to fully coordinate his pieces by playing bishop to b7, rook a to c8, and then rook f to d8, when he has no particular problems at all, and the white queen will probably have to move. So bishop g3, a typical masterly move. White's got more space. He keeps the pieces on, and the bishop controls a very powerful diagonal. Well, black gets on with the job. b6. White brings his rook to c1, and now black gets ready for rook to c8. White castles, and now black plays pawn up to a6. Well, I don't know whether black thought that a move like rook c8 was going to be answered by queen a4. I'm pretty sure that that was what his train of thought was in this position. And that move is surprisingly awkward for black to meet. Black certainly doesn't want to go making a move like a5 in this position, which would really make his queenside pawn structure rather weak. So black in the game, if we go back to the game now, tries to take action against that with the move a6. White plays knight c4. Black plays knight b4. And for an instant, it looks as though white is getting into trouble, as black starts to take the initiative with bishop to e4. Now this drives the white queen to the corner and enables black to take back on c5 in peace. But now white starts to really get coordinated. He hits back with an attack against the knight. Black plays a very interesting move here, a5, and white is not to be shaken from his plan, rook fd1. And with this move, white dominates the centre of the board. Just going back, well, white could have taken this piece on b4. Black recaptures, and suddenly the white queen has nowhere to go. This would not be a very wise decision for white to make. So instead, showing the maturity of the very strong grandmaster, Gurevich plays rook fd1. Knight bd5. And now knight fd2. So for the second time in this game, Gurevich refrains from exchanging pieces. This is a very good idea. And suddenly black is very awkwardly placed in the middle of the board. What it boils down to is white has two rooks in the centre, and black can't really match that state of affairs. Moreover, the black queenside pawn structure is slightly more committed than white's pawn structure. White is much better coordinated in this position. Malakov doesn't like the idea of white taking on e4, so he moves out of the way. But white continues to exhibit excellent command of coordination here with bishop f3. And white's ideas in this position include knight to b3, hassling the bishop on c5, and white even might be threatening e4, which makes it slightly awkward for the black queen. We talked about the white queen being trapped on the c file earlier. Here the black queen is on the receiving end of the rook on d1. Malakov plays knight d7. Knight e4, again superb coordination by white. Rook a7. Black has never really been able to find a good square for this rook so far in this game. Rook a7, well, at least defends the knight on d7, but in all other respects, it's not a particularly impressive move. Knight c3, exchanging off black's most powerful piece. The knight on d5 is the glue which holds the black position together. So again, Gurevich shows exemplary technique. He just exchanges that piece off the board. And now white's introducing the idea of getting his queen back into the game with ongoing pressure. Note the power of the bishop on g3, and White's ever-present idea of sticking his knight in on d6. That knight on d6 would probably force Black to surrender his dark square bishop, and really that's not what Malakoff wants. So Queen e7, stopping the knight from coming in, or at least dissuading it from doing so. Queen c1, as explained, and now Black plays knight to f6. Now comes a move which is really the peak of White's strategical play. Tactics come out of a strong position. Bang! Knight takes b6. Very strong move indeed. I mean, Gurevich couldn't have planned this, 10, 15 moves ago, but he certainly understood that when you're better coordinated, you've got all your pieces working together, and this is exactly what White has in this position. Every single piece is doing a job. Black's position, well, you can't really say either of his rooks are doing the job. So Black's coordination is poor, White's coordination is excellent. And the idea is that after bishop takes b6, he's coming in with bishop d6. Malakoff plays the miserable move knight d5, but the point is that if Black moved his queen in this position, we're going takes with the queen. Obviously if Black takes with the king here, then I think you'll find that rook c8 decides the game immediately. But it's the same after queen takes f8. We're going rook c8 anyway. Knight blocks. Bishop c6, beautiful coordination here. Rook c7, and now another superb move. Rook d8. Lovely variation. I think the knight on e8 is going down the tubes, and just look at this useless bishop on h7. Let's take this variation on a little bit. Let's say Black plays rook takes c6. We come in and take with the queen. He takes on d8. We recapture. Look at that pin knight on e8. So excellent play there by Gurevich. Going back to the game then, let's finish it off. Black played knight d5, probably recovering from the shock. Bishop takes e7, knight takes c3, bishop takes f8, and a quick count of the pieces showed that White was well ahead, so Malakoff resigned. Alright, well I can't expect you to play as well as that at the start of your chess careers when you're trying to improve. But do recognise that getting your pieces working for you as a unit is highly important in chess. Don't just strike out with one or two pieces in isolated attacks. You've got to get everything working for you. Coordination of the army is